you. Thank you so much.
Hey again. Yeah, hey again. How you doing? Good. How you doing? Chief. Neil?
Yeah.
Tommy. I've been. Miss Lisa.
You bet.
Tom.
Well, good morning and welcome, everybody. The City of Wausau is very honored to have a special guest today, and we're going to be talking about some issues with the things going on with guns. This is quite an honor for the City of Wausau. As far as I know, this is the first time a sitting governor has come to the City Hall to come and speak. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Chief Ben Bliven from the Wausau Police Department with his words. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I was told I had about an hour and a half, so I'll try and keep it a little shorter than that. Appreciate everybody being here and having an opportunity to speak. So Robert Peel started the London Metropolitan Police Department back in 1829. He's considered the father of modern policing. He developed 9 policing principles that many police departments live by today. And I'm going to talk about one of his principles. To maintain at all times a relationship with the public that gives reality to the historic tradition that the police are the public and the public are the police. The police being only members of the public who are paid to give full-time attention to duties which are incumbent on every citizen in the interest of community welfare and existence. If you live in a community where the ratio of police officers is 2 to 1,000, you are considered to have a good supply of police officers. But if police are the only people working to reduce crime and injustice, there are only 2 people for every 1,000 working to reduce crime in your community. And we have a lot of committed police officers working in every community in our state to improve the quality of life. But it's also important that we have every citizen working alongside us to make our communities a better place. It's imperative today that we have all hands on deck. Drugs, mental health, and access to firearms are some of the key factors in the most serious crimes. We have local initiatives that focus on these factors. At Wausau PD, in conjunction with our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners, we are committing 3 times the resources to drug investigations today than we did 1 decade ago. Methamphetamine and heroin are the focus of those investigations. Our local federal task force just completed an investigation that resulted in 12 federal indictments and 4 additional state charges for a methamphetamine conspiracy. These types of investigations make our community safer. In terms of mental health, we have trained most of our officers in crisis intervention training to improve their ability to communicate well to those people who have mental health needs. We've partnered with Marathon County and North Central Healthcare to create our crisis assessment response team. This allows us to be proactive and provide a much better service for those in crisis. We also created a victim response unit and hired a mental health therapist to help victims with mental health needs. It's free for victims of crime. And much of that free service is directed to the youth in our community. Wisconsin's Attorney General is hosting a summit next week to talk about the process involved in emergency detentions, which is in critical need of revision. Law enforcement needs this process to be much more efficient so we can free up officer time to focus on other priority work. And the process needs to be better for those people who are in crisis in our communities. These are some of the things law enforcement is doing to impact the problems our communities are facing. But many people ask me, what can I do to help? Remember, the safety of our community is a responsibility that is incumbent on every one of us, not just law enforcement. We all can do more. Regularly attend your local neighborhood group meetings. Attend the Police Department Citizens Academy. Lock up your firearms. Report suspicious activity and criminal behavior to police every time. Don't rely on somebody else to do it. Set clear expectations for your children about firearms, alcohol, and drugs. Be an outstanding role model for your children and for every other child in our community. Volunteer your time and give money to organizations that support youth in our community. Organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, Big Brothers Big Sisters, the YMCA, your schools after school programs. Do something that supports our youth. Be a scout leader, a sports coach, become a foster parent. This is what makes communities great. We have a lot of people actively working to positively impact our community's youth. Edward Everett Hale said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do that something that I can do." We are working hard every day to enhance the quality of life in our community. As police officers, we have a vested interest in the quality of life here in our own community because we live here. Our families live here, our children go to school here. Partner with us today and find a way to get involved even more than you were yesterday. With that, it's my pleasure to announce and introduce Wisconsin's Lieutenant Governor.
All right, thank you so much to Mayor, and thank you, Police Chief. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for welcoming us to Wausau. I'm honored to be here again. I'm Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, and I'm standing here with our governor, along with other leaders from around the state and around the area, because it's time. Simply put, it's time for us to stand up for victims of senseless gun violence. It's time for us to realize the devastation of what firearms in the wrong hands can do to our communities. And now, more than ever, as it has always been, it's time for us to act. And that's why we're all here in support of Governor Evers taking this monumental step and calling for a special session of the legislature to address gun violence in our state. I personally have dealt with this issues. I've lost friends, I've lost classmates way too early. And the fact that, even saying way too early, the fact that we lost those people at all is a problem that we need to confront. And my story isn't isolated. There are so many others with other stories to tell that are far more intense and far more devastating than anything that I've experienced. But I do know the pain that it brings to families, the grief that it brings to individuals and entire neighborhoods, and I know that it is felt through far too many communities throughout our state. And the last time we called for red flag legislation, a former colleague of mine, State Senator LaTanya Johnson, gave a very powerful story, recalling just how a few years ago her own daughter lost 2 friends to gun violence within a few months span. And if you think it's just a city issue or an urban issue, you're wrong. And you think about just a year ago in Appleton, when a man who was out on bond for a domestic violence related incident, he was able to buy a gun from an unlicensed seller. And that man went on to kill his wife. And from our previous administration to our current legislature, we unfortunately have too many people who see and read these stories in the news cycle but still refuse to do anything about the violence that continues to plague our state. In fact, they continue to ignore the fact that we see black children in Wisconsin who are more likely to die from guns than their white peers, and also more likely to be killed with guns than African American children in any other state in the country. And that ignorance continues, even with 81% of Wisconsinites in favor, including 78% of gun owners in favor of seeing their lawmakers, seeing their policymakers act by implementing universal background checks. This is a simple first step that we can take to making our communities that much safer, because no one deserves to die from a bullet because politicians continue to ignore the plight of so many people amongst us. So once again, we are calling out and calling on the Assembly Speaker Robin Vos and Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald and all Republicans and every member of our legislature to let them know that the time to get this right is now. It's our responsibility as elected officials to protect everyone in our state from the things that will harm them and cut their lives short. And I stand on my record as a state legislator on gun reform, and I continue to stand as Lieutenant Governor to fight for common sense gun laws that will keep guns out of the wrong hands. And I am also committed, along with our governor, to creating an environment where violence is not the answer, where everyone, regardless of your zip code, can get a family-sustaining job, can go to a great school, and have access to quality and affordable health care. It is long past time that we come together to end the epidemic of senseless gun violence here in the state of Wisconsin and across the country. Only then will we all have communities where every woman, man, and child can have the opportunity to thrive. And with that said, I would like to turn it over to my good friend and our governor, Tony Evers. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks for being here today. Thank you, Mayor and Police Chief, for joining us, and all the other local officials and people from the Wausau area to chat about the issue of gun safety. Since taking office in January, I've called on the legislature to take action and pass common sense gun safety reform that frankly is supported by Democrats and Republicans and independents all across the state and frankly all across the country. Last month, I stood with members of our communities, elected officials, and law enforcement agencies in announcing 2 critically important and common sense pieces of legislation. The first was a bill expanding universal background checks in Wisconsin to ensure that no matter where someone buys a firearm or who they're buying it from, the process is the same for everyone. And the second is a bill to create an extreme risk protection order process that allows loved ones and law enforcement officials to petition to remove guns from people who have been found by a judge to be a danger to themselves or others. And after calling for these important pieces of legislation, giving Republicans a chance to listen to the people of our state and do the right thing, and providing ample opportunity and time for them to do so, unfortunately, they didn't act. So I've noted several times in this, my time in office, there's an inscription on the roof of or the ceiling of the governor's conference room. It says, "The will of the people is the law of the land." So today, as I promised, I'm calling on the legislature to meet in special session on gun safety reform. Our kids are asking us to act. They're asking us to be the adults in the room. They're asking us to do the right thing. And that's why, as I promised, we're going to start with the bills that we agree on, not a bunch of other stuff, some really basic issues. At that, 80% of Wisconsinites support universal background checks and extreme risk protection orders, including the majority of gun owners. These are common sense solutions that we know can save lives because they have already done so in states that have adopted them. It's that simple. Two bills that we know without a doubt, without ambiguity, this is what the majority of the people in the state want. Each and every day that elected officials choose not to take gun violence seriously, that's a choice that has consequences. Each and every day that the Republican leadership chooses ideology and false dichotomies over what is right, that's a choice that has consequences. And each and every day that Republican leadership chooses weakness over common sense, that's a choice that has consequences. The consequences of this continued inaction are too high, folks. That's why I want to be clear. I don't want any political games. I don't want any procedural shenanigans, no circumventing the democratic process, no last-minute amendments, no middle-of-the-night solutions that no one wants, no nonsense. I want Republicans in the legislature and Democrats in the legislature to work together to send these bills to my desk. And if they're not going to do that, then every single member of the legislature should have the opportunity to vote on it and let their vote speak for itself. In the meantime, I need your help, people of Wisconsin. We need people to reach out to their legislature and ask them to support these common sense proposals. We have to get this work done, folks. So thanks very much for your time, and be glad to answer any questions the media might have. Yes, sir.
Can you talk about why you chose Wausau specifically to make this announcement?
We're going all across the state to make this announcement. We started in Milwaukee. We're going to Wausau, Clare, tomorrow Green Bay. This is a statewide issue. These 80% that support common sense solutions don't just exist in Madison. They exist all across the state of Wisconsin. They don't just exist in those that don't own guns. It's a solution that appeals, and 80% of the people support it. So we want to make sure everybody's involved in this discussion across the state, and that's why we're here in Wausau. Yes, sir.
What would your answer be to the slippery slope argument? That, yeah, you want these two things now, but you're going to want something.
Yeah, that's a great question, because I see the Republican, one of the Republican leaders has already gone down that path. This is about these two laws. It's not about anything else. And the idea that someone is bringing up this slippery slope, not you, but the legislator, that is absolutely the distraction that we anticipated. We have two laws that we're proposing. One is extreme risk protection orders. One is universal background checks. They have 80% of the people of the state of Wisconsin want it, and that's what we're focusing on, what we can accomplish. That's what people have been asking us for years to do. So I believe we're in a good position to do it. Yes, sir.
Do you consider yourself a supporter of the Second Amendment?
Yes, of course I do. Of course I do. People have, the Second Amendment is not going away because of this. This has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. It's making sure that people that have guns, that the universal background check treats everybody the same, right? Right now, background checks are only done with licensed dealers. There's all sorts of opportunities that people that would not pass those background checks have to have guns. We want to make sure that the background check is universal and across the board. And again, the issue of extreme risk protection orders, that is important because there are people that display behavior that a judge, after going through due process, could possibly say, let's temporarily take the gun away from this person. And that's not only an issue of harming others. The majority of gun violence in the state, as it relates to or suicides in the state, relate to gun violence. I had a grandnephew that blew his head off because he had ready access to a gun. When you are in a position where you have to think twice because you don't have access to a gun, people survive and thrive and get the help they need. This is really common sense. It has nothing to do with the Second Amendment. Nothing. Yes, hi.
Even with the special session, with what confidence do you have that Speaker Voss and Majority Leader Fitzgerald will actually bring the bills to the floor?
Well, I'm hopeful. I mean, at the end of the day, the people of Wisconsin should know where their state reps stand on this issue. And the only way they're going to know is if we take it to the floor and take a vote. I think that is critically important. To me, it's morally the right thing to do, but frankly, if you're a politician, if 80% of the people say, we want this done, and you ignore that, you risk not being reelected. It's as simple as that. So I believe that they will, at the end of the day, bring this to the floor and let the people of Wisconsin understand who's voting yes and who's voting no. Hi. Sure. Well, the 80% that both of us talked about is Marquette University poll that has been done several times. And
Yeah, and that date, I can get that to you in the background. Yeah, I'd be happy to.
great.
Make sure, bro.
One.
If I can ask just one more quick one. I think you mentioned, Governor, this morning in Milwaukee that you would consider calling, I think you said, serial special sessions if the legislature fails to act or fails to take a vote. Can you expand on that? Can you tell us what you mean by that?
Well, what that means is if indeed they just blow it off and say, they gavel in, gavel out, say, the heck with the people of Wisconsin, at least 80% of the people of Wisconsin, I have the ability to call another special session. Do I think that's necessary or likely? No.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. You bet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Appreciate you being here.
Like the history lesson too. That was good.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for being here.
You bet. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.